Excuse me, sir, do you have the time?
Who, me?
Yes, do you have the time?
Oh, well, of course I do. A gentleman such as myself, I'd never be caught dead without my pocket watch. This is the Anbeenic RG Nano, and it just came out. Yep, just this week. Anbeenic released it just this week. They definitely didn't release it 2 years ago. It wouldn't make sense to be reviewing a handheld that was 2 years old. Okay, so this isn't actually a review. There's 1,000 reviews. You know what this device is like. But I would like to see what this device is capable of, what it might be good for, and specifically, I would like to try to turn this device into a digital audio player. It would be awesome if I could get it to play audiobooks too. I'm not hopeful on that end, but we'll see what we can make happen. While we talk about the plans for this thing, roll some B-roll. I know I said this isn't really a review, but I still want to go over some specs and just some basic first impressions real quick. It has a 1.54-inch screen with a resolution of 240 by 240, and the screen actually looks pretty good, considering how small it is. I assume it probably used to be a smartwatch display, so it's decently clear and vibrant, and it gets relatively bright. For the CPU, we have the ARM Cortex-A7 clocked at a smoldering 1.2 GHz. With it, you'll actually be able to play up to some PS1 games, but as I'll talk about later, I wouldn't recommend playing most of what this thing can play. It has a 1050 mAh battery, so obviously it's not going to be very big or last terribly long. But on the bright side, it charges very quick. And after we're done with it, if you're using it for music, it's actually going to last way longer than the 2.5 hours that Anbeenic says it'll last. So you might be wondering why I would even do this. Why would you want to use something that's clearly not meant to be an MP3 player as an MP3 player? Well, firstly, and this was probably the most important reason, it just seemed fun. I wanted to try it. I'd also like to be able to decentralize all of the things that my phone does for me in life. You know, we have these super powerful computers in our pockets all the time now. There's a lot of digital minimalism videos on YouTube where people will try to take the things that their phone can do for them and separate those into a bunch of different devices. So they'll have a camera, they'll have a gaming device, they'll have a notepad, a physical notepad for taking notes. And you just separate your phone out into, 20 different things. So you become less and less reliant on this one thing that's designed in a lot of ways to be addictive. And I don't think going that extreme is always a bad thing necessarily, but I'm not at the point where I want to get rid of my smartphone and replace it with 20 things that I now have to carry a backpack around just to have all of the things that my phone used to be able to do for me. But if I could just offload some of what my phone does for me, like I don't want to be gaming on my phone at all anymore. I'm gonna start carrying around a separate device just for gaming, and if I could possibly get that device to replace Pandora or Spotify or whatever too, that would be awesome. There's also the fact that we're living in the 2020s where technological progress means removing features that everyone wants from their existing devices. What I'm saying is I don't have an SD card slot in my phone. If I did, I honestly probably would have never even tried this. But since I can't easily expand my phone storage, I'm just gonna see if I can put a ton of high quality audio files and audio books on this thing that is not meant to play them. Since for some reason this $35, and yes, I got it on sale for $35, since for some reason this $35 gaming device from China can do what my new Samsung smartphone can't. If you're wondering about gaming on this thing, if you're anything like me, you might have seen other reviews of this device where they say that it's too small to game comfortably on, and you're like, well, that's not me. Those are just a bunch of old geezers who can't see the screen because it's so small. I'll be able to see the screen fine. No. It really is quite an uncomfortable to game on device. I think Game Boy and Game Boy Color would work out fine, but that really might be about it. The screen really looks pretty nice for square, relatively square aspect ratio systems like the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. And even some systems like Super Nintendo you can run in closer to a square aspect ratio, and they'll look fine as long as they don't have small text to read or anything. But I think I'll agree with other YouTubers when they say that this thing is mostly just a novelty and you're not going to be doing any serious gaming on here, except for, you know, light RPGs or something that doesn't require super precise button inputs. I think this thing is perfect for JRPGs, and hopefully music, but we'll see. Just one hardware thing that I'd like to comment on is this D-pad. I don't see everyone mention it in their reviews, and I don't know why, but this D-pad is way undersized for the shell that it's in. I don't understand how they could even do that and think that it's okay. That's why one of the most popular mods for this thing that you can find on Etsy is a bigger D-pad that fits in this shell better without all this weird wobble. Yeah, stock, it comes with G-Menu 2X, and G-Menu 2X is awful to use. It's very strange. I've seen the same type of menu on a lot of Chinese, well, most handhelds are Chinese, but handhelds that are designed to be used by Chinese users, they seem to have the same weird things going on in their menu. I don't know if it's just a different format that they're more used to over there, but like whenever you go into these things, it's not the B button that takes you back, it's start for some reason. And I've seen that on a lot of a lot of cheap handhelds. Yeah, it's just a little bit clunky. And there's this other front end that you can switch to, Retrophy, and it's a little bit better. You still have this stupid clock on the stock operating system that, I don't know. I don't know if anyone wants to use this as a clock, but it's there if you wanted it. But for me, all it does is slow down in between switching operating systems and on initial boot up, because you have to hit start to clear through the clock, and then it takes a few more seconds to actually boot into your front end.
Okay, so out of the box, my RG Nano came with a 64GB Kioxia card, which is totally serviceable. A lot of times these come with unbranded cards that are very prone to becoming corrupted and unusable. But Kioxia is very reputable, so if you wanted to just stick with the stock card and not add that much stuff to it, you totally could. But for our purposes of trying to use this as a digital audio player, I'm going to need something with a little bit more capacity. So I'll be upgrading to a 512 Samsung card that should be able to hold my entire audiobook library. Along with my games, of course.
Okay, so one of the biggest things that we're going to do to improve the experience of the RG Nano is to download a custom firmware option by Drum78. I will link to it in the description, this GitHub page. But basically what we're going to do is scroll down here, and if you're flashing a brand new, fresh SD card with nothing on it, which is what I'm doing here, you're going to download Funky SD Card Drum78 RG Nano.img. If you're going to be updating the stock card, however, you're going to choose one of these other options, and there's instructions on this page on how to go about doing that. But for our purposes, we will just download this file here. Alright, so I just wanted to make clear here that this is not meant to be a complete tutorial. I'm just going to show you the basics of what I'm doing, how this process goes, and I will link to a full tutorial on how to flash
Drum 78's firmware onto this card. I'll link to a video tutorial in the description. He does a way better job than I could anyway. So if you're unfamiliar with the process, go watch him. If you want to just move on with the rest of this video, stick around. Now that we have Drum 78's funky OS operating installed, something else that we can do is add some third-party applications. These apps can do everything from fix little audio glitches to play RPG Maker 2000 games, or even a graphing calculator for some reason. Don't use the RG Nano as a calculator. I'm going to go ahead and download this real-time clock application here. I don't know that the operating system doesn't have a real-time clock function already baked in, but just in case, I'm going to download this to make sure my Pokemans works correctly. The other app that I'm very interested in is Game Music Emulator. Game Music Emulator is specifically a music player for playing the audio files that were used in retro consoles. So like Super Nintendo, for example, uses SPC files, and it's more like a list of instructions, kind of like a MIDI file, than just a recording of audio like an MP3 file is. So they take up way less space in your memory, and you can store thousands of SPC files, or all the systems have different file types, but this can play most of them from what I understand. So I'm very interested in using this application to also have thousands of hours of classic RPG music on my device. Media player, I don't think anyone's going to be watching full-length movies on this, but that's there if you want to watch the B movie for memes. Pocket CDG, a karaoke. Again, I couldn't see myself singing karaoke through this device, but it does have a good audio chip, so I don't know. And then I'm not smart enough for a Linux terminal, so we won't worry about that one either. And as far as I understand, adding the third-party applications is as simple as going into your applications folder on your drive and dragging over the OPK files. And I think that's it. We'll see if they work. If you're wondering how I'm going to get all of my audiobooks onto the RG Nano, I'm going to be using this program for Windows. I think it's on Mac too, called Libation. You basically sign into your Audible account via this app, and it can go through and scan your library and automatically download all of your books as M4B files. That's the original audio file type, and that works great for players that are meant specifically for audiobooks, but there isn't anything that plays M4B files that I can get on the RG Nano, so we have to download them as MP3s instead. In the settings, you can change it so that it downloads as MP3s instead of the M4B files. And I also have here split my books into multiple files by chapter, as opposed to it downloading one giant MP3 file that is the entirety of the book. If I have it split up by chapters, it'll play in the media player like it's songs on an album. The chapters are like individual songs on an album. Okay, so I'm copying over the last of my ROMs now. This is PS1 here, so it's taking the longest. I don't expect I'm going to be playing a lot of PS1 on this thing, but just in case, it's there. And now we're going to go ahead and create a new folder. And I'm just going to call this Media. And inside this, I'm going to have a couple of folders. We're going to have audiobooks.
And you know what? Let's make a new one. This will be retro music. I'm dividing these into audiobooks is audiobooks, obviously. Music is going to be regular MP3s, and then retro music, I'm going to have all the like SPC files for Super Nintendo music to be played on the retro emulator. Now I'm going to copy all of my Audible library that I've converted to MP3 files into the audiobooks folder that I created in the drive. And in case you were wondering, it is 150 gigabytes for 332 audiobooks as MP3s.
Editing Rick here. So the astute of you in the crowd may have noticed that the files that I went to copy over, the audio files, didn't actually copy. And that's because on Libations, in the settings, you can change the way that it downloads and names the file, the actual audiobook file. You can have the full Audible name, you can have a short Audible name, you can have just one author just one author selected as part of the file name. You can have all the authors selected as part of the file name if there's multiple authors. All kinds of options. If you select the full audiobook name, which is what I usually prefer, every once in a while, if you get a book like the Ultimate Henry David Thoreau Collection is one of the books I have on here, and its full name includes each of the individual books in that collection, and as a result it winds up naming your audiobook file a really long name, so long that Windows doesn't know how to handle it, I guess. So I'd recommend being careful with that to start off with, because if you create a file that's too big, it becomes kind of a hassle to get rid of it, because you can't just delete it, because Windows doesn't know what to do with a file with a name that big. So the easiest way, if you do accidentally do that, is to use 7-zip to rename the file and then and then delete it, or just rename it a shorter name. That, you can do that too.
Now that we've got our custom OS on here, let's get into the feasibility of how well this thing can work as a digital audio player.
So the stock Anbeenic software comes with a music player that is basically exactly GMU Music Player, although they don't call it that. But it works very similarly, but they have just some of the controls are a little bit different. This GMU Music Player, I had never used GMU Music Player before trying this. It works, it's very serviceable, but it's not the most intuitive thing ever. So you have 3 different screens. You have your playlist screen, you have your track info screen, and then you have the file browser screen. And the way this works is you go through the file browser screen, and you go down and you select your media, which I have in the media folder, and then I'll go to music, and we'll select the Hollow Knight soundtrack, for example. And we can go through and hit A, and you can see whenever I hit A, it adds a song to the playlist, and it cycles down to the next song. So if you wanted to just hit A a bunch and add the entire playlist, or add all the songs to the playlist, you could do it very easily that way. We hit select again to swap back to the playlist menu, and then you can just hit play to start playing the top song. You can hit B to change the play mode. We're on repeat, now we're on random, continuous. You can use the D-pad, right or left, to control the volume. Up and down, move up or down the track. Left or right will automatically skip to the next track. X is your pause button, and Y will remove that song from the playlist. Something to make note of is that this volume here, that is a scale of 1 to 15, it is affected by the system volume before you enter GMU Music Player. So, for example, if we back out and then we turn the volume up more here, and then we go back into GMU Music Player, see, this is now playing at a much higher volume at 15, whereas before I had it maxed out at 15, and I'm sure you could probably barely hear it. Something worth noting is that on the stock Anbeenic software, the GMU Music Player that's included, there are no power saving features, so it'll play your music just mostly the same as this will, but there are no power saving features, so the screen will not turn off, the screen won't dim. But this, as you can see, while it's playing music, if you leave it for, I don't know what it is, maybe 10 seconds, the screen, even if you have the brightness set all the way up, the brightness will set all the way down, and then the screen will go black. The screen is not actually off. I know you probably can't see it in the video, but the screen is still on, so the screen is still drawing power, but it's much, much, much lower than you might think. I did some testing with this, like so, using this included, this came with it, this USB-C to 3.5mm audio converter. And I played music at a mid-range volume that was just comfortable for me for an hour continuously to see what the power drain was like playing music with the screen off like this. Or not screen off, but screen, as off as I guess it can possibly be. And after an hour, my battery went from 97% to 85%. And then after another hour, it went from 85 to just 79%. So this really is a lot more serviceable and more power efficient than you might expect, even though the screen isn't fully turning off. Unfortunately, the audiobook experience does not work as well as I would have hoped. Because when you start to play a file for a very long time on GMU, it seems to get a little bit buggy. So let's go to the Ultimate Henry David Thoreau collection that I've added here, and we'll just add a bunch of these to the playlist, and we can start playing those. Can you hear that?
July 20 to 23, 1857.
Okay, so you see it's playing. The issue that I've run into with this is it will play, and it'll keep on playing, but if you play it for a really long time, like whenever I was doing that test of audio, I was using audiobooks, and after about, I'm not sure how long it takes for this to happen actually, but I noticed it only happened when it played for a really long time without me messing with anything. The screen would go to a point where I could no longer hit X or any of the other face buttons to get the screen to come back on. I would have to hit the function / home / power button over here, and it would actually take me all the way out of GMU Music Player. And then whenever I came back to GMU Music Player, not only would I not be where I left off in the chapter, but all of the songs, the individual chapters, the songs that I added to the playlist, they are now no longer recognized by GMU. So I have to remove them all manually and then add them all back. So on top of that little bug affecting audiobooks, that's not the only thing, obviously. This is meant for music, not audiobooks, so you also have the issue of, if you have to stop the chapter and, go away and do something, if you don't leave the device running the whole time and then go to resume, if you exited for whatever reason, you've lost your place and you would just have to fast forward your way back to it, and the fast forwarding on this is terrible. which, you know, isn't that big of an issue for music, but trying to fast forward 5 seconds at a time in an audiobook to find where you were is not ideal. And I think there's actually a text file that you can edit for GMU Music Player on your desktop that would change the amount of time that, you know, it would change it from like 5 seconds that you skip to, you know, 10 or 20 or 30 or whatever would be convenient for a book. I think you can do that, but that's not something that I tried just because the experience overall wasn't as ideal as I would hope. So it's kind of a mixed bag. It does work, but not as well as I would have hoped. Unfortunately, I have some bad news about this game music emulator. Maybe I just didn't install it right. I could not find any better instructions for how to install it than what I did. So if someone knows if I did something wrong, please let me know in the comments. But, so it does technically play music. So let's select something that people would be really familiar with, most likely. I'm not worried about copyright, I don't think, because it's so strange. Can you hear that? So it's playing, but it's playing at a faster speed than it should be, and it's all staticky and garbled. For the life of me, I can't figure out what's going on. I didn't know if it might be some issue with it trying to run this emulator at 60 hertz and maybe the ROMs were supposed to be run at 50 hertz, or I really don't know. I thought at first it might have been an issue with, because this program seems to work with zipped files as well. So I was playing, let's see, Top Gear 3000 is one of my favorite games. Yeah, it just doesn't work. I thought it might have been an issue with trying to play the files from zipped files, so I unzipped some of the files. Donkey Kong Country was an unzipped file, but it still wasn't working. So this, unfortunately, is not working. If someone knows a fix for this, let me know, and I will pin that in the comments. So after putting Drum 78's OS on here, I've been carrying this thing around for about a week. And here are a few things that I've learned. One, it is too small to play most things comfortably. I think Russ from Retro Gamecore was right when he said that this thing is a Pokemon machine. I think you'll do very well to just use this thing for Pokemon and other JRPGs, any game that doesn't require super precise inputs. I think you'll have a great time if you can see the screen that small. And on the screen, I still think this thing is definitely best suited for Game Boy and Game Boy Color. You can use it for 3x4 content, but it's not as ideal. I think running SNES in 9x8 works out just fine, so long as the game, again, doesn't require super precise inputs because the buttons and the stupid D-pad on this thing. But if you wanted to play Chrono Trigger or something on this from the SNES, I'm sure that would run beautifully in a 8x9 aspect ratio. Secondly, we learned that this does make a decent DAP. You can totally use this as an audio player, and it works out okay. It's got a decent audio chip. It can hold all of my music and audiobooks. It doesn't have a 3.5mm headphone jack, so unfortunately you can't do that. And no Bluetooth either, so you are restricted to USB-C headphones or using a converter. We have determined that it is not well suited for audiobooks. And we have also determined it is either not well suited for playing retro music, or I'm just a moron. It's probably that last one, if we're being honest. Something else I'd like to make note of, it's common knowledge by this point that this thing can fit in your pocket watch pocket. So that's how I've chosen to carry it around for this past week. But if you're like me and you have something with a screen in your pocket, you naturally want the screen to be facing towards your leg rather than out, just to protect the screen. But if you do that and it's hot, the perspiration after a while will build up on the face of the thing, and I'm sure it's getting in the internals, and I'm sure that's probably just not the best for the longevity of the device, so I'd recommend screen, buttons, face out, don't get sweat in them. And that's about it. The only other thing I had was a little experiment I wanted to do. Everywhere you turn on the internet, people keep asking the same question. What is this? A handheld for ants? So I decided to finally answer that age-old question. Through science.